Hey guys, I just finished that Final Fantasy VII Remake, and let me tell you, I have some thoughts about it. We're going to cover my thoughts on the story and the ending in this video, just kind of off the cuff, because I really need to digest how I feel about this ending. If you haven't played the game, if you haven't beaten it, turn this off right now, come back when you're ready to speculate about where the Final Fantasy Remake series goes from here. Alright, so I have another in-depth review potentially in the works for Final Fantasy VII Remake, but I guess I'll just say up front that I really like this game. I'm not a fan of the original Final Fantasy VII. I think its combat is shallow, and as much as I like its setting, its art direction, some of its characters, and a lot of the themes of its story, I think its storytelling, its dialogue, and the overall pacing of the game just isn't great. And for me, I know Final Fantasy VII is beloved by a lot of people. It's their favorite JRPG of all time, their favorite game of all time. That's definitely not the case for me. I think it's a fine game, and I respect it for what it is. I love the music. I love a lot of the stuff about and around Final Fantasy VII, and I respect it for what it is, but I just don't have the nostalgia for it like a lot of people do. So, which is important to note because that might be part of why I think the ending of Final Fantasy VII Remake is so interesting and so successful. And in general, I just think that the new stuff that the remake introduces or changes is all really good. Like 90% of it is really good. There are some patty moments, there's some slower, more boring moments, and there are some times where if you're a newcomer, there are going to be times where you just don't know what's going on. Like when they randomly show Ketshi when the plate is falling, I don't see how anyone who didn't know who that character is will understand what's going on there. But, I mean, those little quibbles about the story aside, I think it was really good. I loved getting to see more of Midgar. I wish there was more to do in the city. I definitely wish we had side quests we could do up on the top plate, and I definitely wish just in general that the level design was a little bit more interesting and that it let you explore and interact with the environment a little bit more than it did. But, I mean, in general, I just think definitely the story is really good. I mean, personally, the game, I think the game is so good because of its combat and its character progressions, but I will talk about that in a separate video maybe. For now, though, I think we should definitely get into Final Fantasy VII's ending. So like I said, I like it. I think the execution is a little bit wacky, but the concept and the meta-narrative to me is just so cool. I mean, in a way, this is kind of a sequel. I've seen a lot of people call this a requel, like a sequel that retells the original story, the story of the original Final Fantasy VII. But in a way that, I mean, it keeps the original intact, both canonically and historically within the events of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like, the original game's events are still... they still happened, right? Which feels in some ways like a capitulation to the fans of the original so that they don't feel burned by the left turn this game takes in its last like hour or two or 3 hours or whatever. But personally, I thought it was a very smart move. And the reason I think it's so good, first of all, it's just bold. And I like bold artistic decisions like that. I think this one was really successful. And I also just think it was necessary because otherwise, like, whether this is one more game or 5 more games, the novelty of playing a remake of Final Fantasy VII probably would have worn off in the time between the end of this game and whenever the next ones are. That was something I was really worried about when they announced that this game was going to be a multi-part series. I kind of was like, how are they going to keep us interested for people who know what goes on? Like, even if the gameplay is incredible, and I think it is, and I'm personally not a huge story guy. Like, I don't play games just for their story or whatever. But even so, like, I probably would have lost interest if I knew exactly what was going to happen, if I knew that Aerith was for sure going to die, and we'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, I just think it's super smart. Now, none of us know what happens next. We might have an idea. I'm sure they're going to hit a lot of the same beats, and a lot of events will be similar, but there'll be new spins on those events, and things will happen in a different way, and the pathway to getting to and from the iconic environments and stuff that people know will be entirely different now, and that is super cool. Now I was already excited to have more of this game to play just because I love the combat and I like the characters really well, but oh my god, like, we don't know what's going to happen next. And that is so cool. That is so cool to me. And I mean, I know a lot of people are really upset about that. I know they're upset that this isn't a beat for beat remake, but for me, it's much more interesting to not know what's going to happen next. You know, even if the next game or however many games there are totally biff it and don't stick the landing the way this one did for me, at least we're going into it not knowing what happens next, and we get to speculate about Final Fantasy VII, and we get to theorize, and there's more to look forward to, and I think that that's really, really cool. I mean, by the end of the remake, there's a lot of big questions. I mean, obviously, will Aerith live by the end of this game? Is Zack going to be alive in the same universe as Cloud now? And what does that mean for their relationship and for Cloud's discovery of who he really is? And, you know, what's the deal with Sephiroth? It seems like he might know something. It seems like Aerith might know more than she's letting on. And I definitely have my theories, which I guess we can get into. I mean, personally, I could see Square just doing one more game. Maybe they'll do two. Like, I guess I could see this being a trilogy as well, but I really think that we'll just get one more game, and that will cover some of the main beats and themes of the original Final Fantasy VII for everything that came after Midgar, but it's going to be a very different structure with lots of new events. They're going to probably cut a lot of stuff, streamline a lot of stuff, and add a lot of new stuff, you know? Replace things that we already know and have already seen with entirely new character interactions and side quests and story beats. And I think they're going to subvert our expectations in more ways than one. I don't think that Aerith will be alive by the end of whatever the Final Fantasy VII Remake series. However many games it is, I don't think Aerith is going to be alive by the end of it, because obviously that's what they're kind of implying by the end of this, of Aerith might live through this. But I think ultimately she won't be able to, and that's going to make her inevitable sacrifice like that much more sad and that much more impactful, especially for people who know that she dies. Maybe she'll survive where she should have been struck down by Sephiroth in the original game, but by the end of it, I think her and even Wedge or Zack or any other characters that are alive by the end of this that shouldn't be, according to the original canon, I think they'll probably have to make some sort of sacrifice in order to stop Sephiroth from doing whatever it is Sephiroth is trying to do. Because honestly, I don't think the themes of Final Fantasy VII work without Aerith's sacrifice, in contrast to the like power-hungry, maniacal narcissism of Sephiroth. I'm kind of hoping that they keep the universe-hopping, alternate timeline stuff to a minimum. Like, it was definitely a big part of the ending in this game, but I felt more like a tool than it did like we are introducing this new plot point to me. I could totally be wrong, but that's kind of how I feel about it. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I really do think that this next game is going to be maybe just one more game. And gameplay-wise, I think it won't be that much different from the game, from this Midgar game, right? I don't think we're going to have, like, Witcher 3 Final Fantasy VII. And honestly, like, I'm not even sure that that's what people would really want. I mean, but just look at Final Fantasy 13 and Final Fantasy 15. Their open worlds are kind of boring, and I really hope that that's not the kind of game that we're getting in Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 or whatever. Personally, I prefer something more like Final Fantasy 12 or Dragon Quest 11, where it's open zones, but it's not just a huge open world. And if they stick with this chapter formatting, I could definitely see that happening in the future games in this series. But because I am expecting them to do so much different and to change things and streamline things, I also think that we probably won't be playing as the full party in combat. I could see Cid being purely the pilot of the Highwind, and that's all he does. And Cat Shi might just be this weird character that's tagging along and shows up in cutscenes and dialogue, and that's about it. I could even see them treating Yuffie and Vincent as guest characters rather than full-on party members. They seem to be really seeding that Midgar is going to go back to war with Wutai. Maybe Yuffie will be a main party member, but I could really see them just sticking with Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, and Aerith, and maybe Red 13, right? And maybe Yuffie, but unless they give Vincent a whole lot more to do in the story, I mean, they could write Vincent out entirely, or just have him be some weird background character that shows up here and there in different parts or whatever. I could be wrong. Maybe they will give all 9 playable characters their time In fact, I was even looking at the menus the other day, and it looks like there are 5 more character slots available, even with Red 13 in there. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't think so. I think with how complex the weapon system, materia system, all those upgrades and everything, and the combat, I just don't think you're going to get a full 9 unique playable characters, which sucks, but it also makes sense. And similarly, I don't think you're going to get all the story beats, and I don't think this is going to be like some huge 4 or 5 game series like I've seen people postulating. I think you're going to get 1, maybe 2 more games, which is both good and bad, but that's why I like this ending so much, is because it keeps the original game legitimate, both historically in our world and canonically in Final Fantasy VII. I mean, whatever the case, it's really cool that we can speculate about, what comes next for Final Fantasy VII Remake. It was a bold choice, and I know a lot of folks are put off and upset by it, but I think it's cool that we have more Final Fantasy VII Remake on the horizon, and that we can speculate and theorize between now and then. That feels really cool. Anyway, thanks for listening to my unscripted, rambly, off-the-cuff thoughts about Final Fantasy VII's ending and where the remake series goes from here. I'm really curious to see how you guys feel about it. Did you like the ending? Did you not like the ending? What do you think happens next? What do you want them to do versus what do you think they're going to do? I'm sure we all have our hopes and also our reservations. So yeah, share them in the comments below or reach out on Twitter, whatever. And be sure to subscribe to get more of my thoughts on the games I'm playing and see whatever other weird experimental videos I got cooking up in the future. All right, guys, I'll talk to you next time. I hope you have a good rest of your day.